Beneath the roots of the Cambodian jungle lies an empire carved in silence and stone. The Khmer Empire, once the heartbeat of Southeast Asia, rose like a myth and collapsed like a prophecy fulfilled. At its height, it commanded rivers, tamed forests, and reshaped the heavens in towers of sandstone. Kings did not merely rule, they declared themselves gods. Their temples were not places of worship, but weapons of legacy, built to outlast memory itself. But power this grand never rests. It rots, it erodes. Beneath the beauty of Angkor's intricate carvings lie centuries of war, of sacrifice, of blood and belief etched into the jungle floor. The empire's rise was swift, divine, and absolute. Its fall came not with one sword, but with many hungers: ambition, invasion, flood, and time. This is not the story of monuments. It is the story of the lives crushed beneath them, of a civilization that flew too close to its gods and vanished into vines. This is the rise and fall of the Khmer Empire. Part 1. Stone and Empire. When gods ruled from Angkor, long before the jungle reclaimed it, before tourists wandered its ruins and scholars puzzled over its fallen stones, Angkor was the pulsing heart of an empire that declared itself divine. Here, beneath the blistering sun and in the monsoon-soaked dark, the Khmer Empire rose not as a kingdom, but as a cosmic order carved into the very earth. It began not with conquest, but with a vision. In the 9th century, a man named Jayavarman II stood atop Panom Kulen and proclaimed himself Chakravartin, universal monarch, a god-king who would unify the fractured lands of Cambodia under one celestial mandate. It was not merely a political act, it was spiritual warfare, through ritual, blood, and fire. The gods of Mount Meru were invited down to inhabit the mortal realm, their thrones built not in heaven, but in stone. The empire did not conquer its neighbors with steel, alone it redefined the world itself, casting its rulers as incarnations of Shiva, Vishnu, and later, the Buddha. And from that sacred lie, a kingdom was born. The jungle shook with ambition. By the time Jayavarman II ruled, Angkor had transformed into the largest pre-industrial city on earth. The ground was split with canals, moats, and reservoirs so vast they seemed to hold the sky. Rice fields fed a million mouths. Temples rose like mountains, their towers arranged in perfect cosmic symmetry, designed to mirror the universe. The greatest of them, Angkor Wat, was not built as a place of worship, but was a tomb for a god. Every block hauled from quarries miles away, every carving a hymn in stone. In its corridors, battle scenes sprawled across sandstone walls. Celestial dancers upsourced twisted in eternal motion. No expense was spared, no labor too great. Human life was just another resource, bent in service of the divine king. And yet, beneath the glory, the cracks had already begun. While kings proclaimed their divine right, the peasants bore the weight. Their backs bent beneath the stones, their hands blistered from building monuments they would never enter. Entire generations lived and died, quarrying, hauling, carving, offering. When famine came, it was they who starved first. When war returned, it was their sons who were conscripted, their daughters who disappeared into temple service, or worse. But they endured, as they always had, believing in the order of things. If the king was God, then suffering was sacred. Jayavarman II, the last great king, rose to power not through peace, but through ashes. After a devastating invasion by the Khams, who burned the capital and shattered the illusion of invincibility, he reclaimed Angkor in a blaze of vengeance. His reign was marked by both compassion and obsession. A Mahayana Buddhist in a land once ruled by Hindu kings, he filled the landscape with smiling faces carved into towers, bodhisattvas, or perhaps his own divine likeness, watching from every direction. He built hospitals and roads, rest houses and reservoirs, but he also drove his people to the brink, raising over 100 temples in a fevered race against mortality. Bion rose at the center of his new Angkor tomb, its labyrinth of faces watching over a city straining under its own weight. The canals overflowed, the forests pushed back, and while the king's gaze smiled eternally from every tower, drought began to creep in through the soil. It was not a single mistake that doomed the Khmer. It was many. Greed, war, overextension. The jungle that had been cleared for rice fields began to reclaim the roads. The vast barriers, silted with mud, the irrigation systems once the envy of the ancient world, failed when the climate shifted. Droughts followed by floods. Crops died. Faith wavered. New enemies rose at the edge of Siam to the west, the Vietnamese to the east. Without a strong spine, the empire bent. The god-kings who had once claimed to hold the cosmos in balance grew weaker. Their successors failed to command loyalty. Factionalism grew. By the 14th century, the cracks had become fractures. By the 15th, the capital was abandoned. Not in fire, not in one climactic battle, but slowly, almost silently. The people left. The jungle returned. Angkor, the city of gods, became a ghost swallowed by vines and mud. But in its time, it had reshaped the world. The Khmer Empire built not just cities, but systems of water, of control, of belief. Its rulers claimed divinity, and for centuries, their people believed it. Their lives were ground into the foundations of greatness, their deaths unnoticed beneath the weight of temples. The stone remains, carved with stories, myths, wars, and sacrifices. But the lives that carried it, all those are the shadows that still walk the ruins. In every crack, in every silent corridor, they are watching. The jungle is patient. It has seen the rise of gods before, and it remembers how they fall. Part 2. Collapse in the jungle. The end of an empire beneath the trees. The end did not come with fire. It came with rain. It came with silence. It came with time. By the late 13th century, the great stone heart of the Khmer Empire had begun to beat slower. The canals that once fed the fields cracked in the heat. The reservoirs that had sustained 1 million lives filled with silt and stood still. The monsoons, once predictable and worshipped like gods, betrayed the land. Droughts came first long, punishing seasons of cracked rice paddies and sunburnt soil. Then the floods followed, violent, churning torrents that tore apart embankments and erased entire villages overnight. The great water systems, once the envy of kings and engineers across the ancient world, failed under the weight of a changing climate. And without water, the empire starved. But the collapse of Angkor was not only environmental, it was spiritual, it was political, it was personal. The kings who followed Jayavarman VII lacked vision. Their reigns were short, their thrones contested. Once, the ruler was the living axis of the cosmos. Now, he was a man, often murdered, often forgotten. Civil war crept in like mist through the forest. Regional governors stopped paying tribute. Religious unity fractured. The shift from Mahayana Buddhism to Theravada Buddhism brought internal conflict, replacing grand temples and cosmic kingship with a quieter, simpler faith. Temples were abandoned not out of heresy, but out of irrelevance. The god-king was no longer needed. In the outer provinces, peasants whispered about the end. Some packed what little they had and moved south, chasing the shifting tide of power. Others stayed, clinging to rituals that no longer brought rain, burning incense before statues whose eyes had long since turned to stone. The jungle listened. It always listens. As the kings of Ayutthaya rose to the west, pressing the boundaries of Siam deeper into Khmer lands, the once great military of Angkor faltered. Battles were fought, yes, but they were rarely glorious. They were messy, desperate, and short. Garrisons were abandoned, roads crumbled. Trade routes shifted away from the dry and dying heartland toward the coasts. Ports became cities, forests became borders, and Angkor, once the center of the world, became a memory left to rot beneath the trees. The capital was moved south, near the Mekong, where water still flowed and rice still grew. But it was not a retreat made in strength, it was a surrender in silence. The kings who ruled from there were no longer gods. They were administrators, survivors, shadows of the divine monarchs who had once reshaped the cosmos in sandstone. In Angkor, temples fell, roofs caved, trees split stone, roots tore through galleries where once queens and generals had walked. Rain pooled in the footprints of forgotten dancers. Monks stayed for a while. Some clung to the sacred geometry of the city, still chanting as the jungles swallowed the walls. But even they left in time, driven out by disease, isolation, or the creeping knowledge that the gods had gone quiet. Angkor was never truly destroyed. It was not sacked in the way Carthage was. It was not burned like Rome. It was abandoned, left to be unraveled by wind and weather. And yet, its ruins endured. In 1431, when the Siamese invaded, they did not need to reduce the city to ash. It was already emptying. They found a place that had once held 1 million souls, now ruled by silence and moss. The fall was complete, not in a single year, but over a century of slow unraveling. And in that slow decay lies its warning. The Khmer Empire did not fall because it was weak. Cliff fell because it grew too confident in its own invincibility. It built temples that outshone the needs of its people. It elevated kings above consequence. It trusted in systems that could not bend, only break. And when the environment shifted, when politics fractured, when faith changed, there was no one left strong enough to hold it all together. Yet the legacy did not vanish. Even in ruin, Angkor inspired awe. When European explorers stumbled upon its towers centuries later, they could not believe such a civilization had existed outside their maps. Locals never forgot. The stones were not dead. They were sleeping. Carvings still told stories. Barreliefs still whispered of wars, kings, and rituals beneath layers of moss. The people of Cambodia, though scattered and subjugated in later centuries, still carried Angkor in their blood. It became more than a memory, it became identity, a silent promise that greatness once lived here and could live again. Today, the temples rise above the canopy like the bones of forgotten giants. Their faces stare across time, cracked but unblinking. Tourists walk the same paths that once bore the weight of empire, unaware that each step echoes with centuries of sacrifice. Guides speak of grandeur, but the stones speak of collapse, of rain that would not stop, of gods who stopped answering, of kings who forgot their people, and of a jungle that never forgets. The fall of the Khmer Empire was not the end. It was a transformation, from power to myth, from city to ruin, from history to warning. And perhaps that is what endures most of all, not the glory, but the silence that followed, the long, slow hush of ambition brought low. Until next time, stay safe and see you in the next history.